Our man in Hong Kong, running the trails, doing the stairs.
Hi, I'm Michael.
I'm Chris.
And we're Breaking Impossible. We've had a website for the better part of 4 years, and now we're doing a video channel, so please like and subscribe.
Take our advice with a grain of salt. We're just telling you what we're doing. We're not doctors.
Yeah, we're not doctors. So I was listening to a podcast, Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist. And at the beginning of his podcast, he reminds people he's not a doctor. He doesn't prescribe medicine. He gives the warning, and I think it's a good idea for us to do it because this is meant to be a lifestyle and fitness blog, and we're going to give advice about hydration and sleep and the benefits we've gotten from exercise. But anybody else, if you're out there and you're listening to us, you have to decide which things to use and which things not to use. And you should talk to a doctor first before you take any of our advice too far.
Yeah, I've seen that podcast too, and I think it's really interesting that an actual doctor tells you, go get doctor's advice.
Yeah, well, I mean, he likes data.
He can't prescribe what's good for you, just statistically
Exactly.
What's good in general.
He actually says that. He says, I'm not responsible for your health, you are.
Yeah.
And talk to your own doctor. So we have to give the same advice. Where are you, Chris?
I'm actually in Stockholm, Sweden. Sweet Sweden.
What are you doing there?
Got a new job. I work for EA Dice, working on Battlefield.
Well,
but more importantly, where are you?
Yeah, well, I'm in Hong Kong training. So we started our website because we decided to train for the Hong Kong 4 Trails Ultra Challenge. And we'd seen a video or a documentary about the challenge called Breaking 60. The goal is to run all 4 of the major trails in Hong Kong in under 60 hours, therefore breaking 60. We started our website and decided to call it Breaking Impossible because we keep trying to do these impossible things. The first thing we did was we went around Lake Washington, which was about 52 miles in 24 hours. And then I saw David Goggins flip a tire for a mile, and we did that twice. And now I'm here in Hong Kong preparing for the 4 trails. I actually had to go to Canada first.
And I hate to interrupt you, but I think the first thing we did actually also is emblematic in our Together Alone thing, because the first one we did was we did a 24-hour challenge, me in California and you in Washington with your son.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, no, I should say we've done more than one of those overnight 24-hour things. The furthest I've gone is 62 miles, so 100 kilometers. Which happens to coincidentally be the same length as the first of the 4 trails.
Yeah.
And that took me 24 hours, and I've got to do that pretty soon in less than 20. And then I have to take that down to around 15 or 16 hours by February if I want a shot at finishing all 298 kilometers in under 60 hours, which is quite a challenge. And actually just doing 100 kilometers is an accomplishment by itself. And doing the Maclehose Trail at 100 kilometers and whatever it is, 3,800 feet of elevation gain and loss. That's an accomplishment, just finishing it, regardless of how long it takes you.
Well, we should put some links in the comments about the challenge itself. I think the map video from the documentary is fantastic. For those listening now, it's important to understand that there are 4 major trails in Hong Kong, the Maclehose, the Wilson, the Hong Kong, and the Lantau trails. All together, they're 185 miles. And as Michael said, to finish them in 60 hours is the challenge. I think what attracted us about it, well, a couple of things, for me anyway, that the organizer, Andre, was most interested or partly interested in promoting parts of Hong Kong that people don't usually see. Like when you think of Hong Kong, you think of Central or Kowloon Tong or Kowloon or wherever, the big settled places, but there's lots of wild places. And as a resident, we lived out in those parts, and I was on the Maclehose sections of the Maclehose Trail quite a bit. So seeing that video like struck so many chords, and and we were both foolish enough to agree with each other
Yeah.
to do it.
So you're talking about the documentary, seeing the documentary, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the origin story is that you sent me the link and I said we should do that. And you said, okay.
And we've kind of regretted it ever since.
Here we are. Yeah. So why don't you say just a little bit about how you lived in Taiwan and Hong Kong and how we met, what was it, 25 years ago?
Yeah, something like that. So, an abiding interest
more than
in
20 years ago.
Yeah, so an abiding interest in martial arts sparked a deep interest in Chinese history in general, but like increasingly in martial arts and military history. And so as part of my undergraduate, I went to Taiwan, studied at the Chonggong University in Tainan, and then wound up staying on for a total of about 8 years, came back to the States. That's when you and I met at the Kung Fu School. And so we sparked it off at that moment. And then I went back after my kids were a certain age to Hong Kong. I lived there for 9 years, becoming a permanent resident. Spent, throughout that whole period doing business across Greater China, across the mainland and everything. Then spent a while in Beijing and then came back to the States. And then when I came back to the States, you and I reconnected and doing all the things that we're doing, martial arts and running and training and sharing the news. We just share an amazing, funny number of, hey, wait, you do that too? Things.
Yeah.
You read that and you thought that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so we met in Bellingham. And then when you moved to Asia, we lost track with one another. And I found you through Facebook. So Facebook's not all bad.
Right.
I was looking for people to work out with, to do more martial arts with, and that worked because I ran into you and a few other people. But it was funny because I would tell people about you and they'd say, who is this Chris guy? And I'd say, oh, he's my oldest friend you've never met because you'd been overseas, right? So yeah, we started off by doing our Kung Fu classes together when you were working at Wizards of the Coast, I think. Yeah, once you'd come back to the United States.
Yep.
And then 4 years ago, we added to shooting and martial arts and the other things that we have common interests in, training for the Hong Kong 4 Trails Ultra Challenge.
Yeah.
Which you knew more about because you lived here. You had an idea what the trails were, right?
Yeah, I think that, the ingredient that really triggered us is we were already doing some of these things, right? We were doing those 24-hour challenges. We were really out there trying to find more purpose and do something really hard.
Yeah.
And so when that video came out, we were both kind of looking at it and thinking, well, that's the hardest thing we could possibly attempt. Like, it's a little insane. Let's do it.
So I got to tell you, I think it's one of the hardest things that anyone can do.
Yeah.
There are people that do these runs that are further, but they often have a crew of people helping them. And this is unsupported. And the nature of it makes it that much harder, not to mention the elevation and the distance and the challenge, the logistical challenge. That's something that I didn't anticipate how difficult that part could be. And I'm only just seeing that now that I've been here in Hong Kong for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think
so. I should say that I had to go to Canada for 3 weeks before I could get into Hong Kong. But one of the things I did in Canada was I did more training with hills and stairs because I had been here 2 years ago with you. Actually, we should start with that. So you and I both came to Hong Kong together 2 years ago for our Kung Fu teacher's 80th birthday party. We had a banquet and there was a tournament and seminars. You were the master of ceremonies. I met my tailor, which is why I'm wearing my suit and my tailored shirt. Part of the experience of traveling and being in Hong Kong, something I'd always wanted to do if I ever made it to Hong Kong. So shout out to Roshan at Sand Tailor. So we came 2 years ago.
I was qualified.
You qualified.
The qualification standard that Andre gave us was to finish at least a 50-mile ultra in standard time for that race. And so we went and ran. That was the hardest thing we had done officially at that point, was to go run that ultra down in Secret Beach in Oregon.
Right.
And it was funny because it seemed, it was not easy, but it was easier because we were not packing all the stuff we usually pack. And I always overpack. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But in any case, just having aid stations was pretty amazing. And then, yes, then later that year, we went to Hong Kong just a few weeks after that. In fact, I was thinking about this the other day. Like 2019, fall 2019 was super busy for us. We went to Oregon for a race, and then we went to Hong Kong for the tournament. Right. And then while at the tournament, we were out attempting the McElhost Trail. And then sadly, I got that new job. And so I couldn't go to the to the 2020 challenge because I just couldn't get the time off after I had started. I was only shortly in EA at that point.
Right. You know, it's funny, you remind me, and I forget all of the things that we've done because we've done so many of them. And I've been so focused on the 4 trails, I forget about doing the Seattle Marathon. I forget about doing Seas Beach. I did my own. I went down to California and did my own ultra prior to that, actually just a few weeks prior to that. And got my first taste of hills, of real steep elevation. Because I train on a bicycle path that's mostly flat, the Burt Gilman Trail and the Smash River Trail. I went to California and did something with some elevation and got a taste of what it was going to be like. And then we did Secret Beach, which had some elevation, but it was also a mix of road and beach, and it was hard. And you finished, and I missed the cutoff for the second half. So you're right. We came to Hong Kong for Lam Chun Fai's birthday banquet, for his 80th birthday banquet. And then we were going to do the MAC together so that I could qualify. And we ended up running out of water the first time, and then I tried again on my own a few days later and got lost. And anyway, long story short, I did not qualify and ended up volunteering instead for 2020. And so I got a lot of really good experience learning the trails and getting to know my way around Hong Kong and meeting the people in the running community, spending some quality time with Andre and Paper, who are very gracious people. Made a lot of friends. In the documentary, you'll actually, even if you just watch the trailer for Breaking 60, you'll get a pretty good sense of it. But so the nature of the challenge is to do all 4 major trails in Hong Kong in one go: the McElhost Trail, the Wilson Trail, the Hong Kong Trail, and the Lantau Trail. And you do it unsupported. The only support you get is to get from one trail to the next. So when you finish the McElhost Trail, somebody throws you in a car and they take you up to the top of the Wilson Trail. And then the Wilson Trail, you actually have to take public transit to get to Hong Kong Island, do the Hong Kong Trail. Then get to from the Hong Kong Trail to Lantau, you have to take a ferry boat. You do this all as quickly as you can, and the travel time is included. If you finish the entire course, all 298 kilometers, and I shouldn't leave this out, with 14,000 meters of elevation gain and loss, a little more than that. If you finish in under 72 hours currently, you're considered a survivor. But to be a finisher, you have to do it in under 60. The challenge is to do all 298 kilometers in under 60 hours. If you finish in under, I should also say, you start in Tuen Mun in the New Territories, and you finish on Lantau Island at the post box. There's this green colonial era post box, and that's the finish. And traditionally, you're supposed to kiss the post box, and Andre has champagne there, and he sprays you with champagne. That's if you survive. If you finish, he sprays you with champagne and gives you a t-shirt. I got to tell you, I have equal respect for both. And in some ways, to be a survivor is harder than to be a finisher because you're out there longer, right? So the 2 of the major things that get people, that prevent them from finishing or surviving, is the elevation, the stairs. A lot of people are not prepared for how many there are and how much elevation there is, but the sleep deprivation. So if it takes you 72 hours, you've been awake longer and you've gone just as far. So in a lot of ways, that's even harder, I think. So I have great admiration for people, even who just attempt it. But whether you're a survivor or a finisher, I have equal respect. And I've had the privilege of being there to support them in 2020 and meeting the finishers and survivors.
I think that's, again, the nature of the challenge, the humor of it, and the strategies that people do individually to to overcome their personal journey. This is one of the things I love about the challenge. Everyone has their own sort of strategies and approaches, and the nature of all of these challenges that attracts me is that, well, there's still a standard. You still have to do a thing in a time, and that doesn't change. And so it's interesting to see what works for you and what works overall, and just train yourself no matter what. And
I've learned that from listening to people who finished it and asking their advice about it. Some of them plan out every single detail, and some of them just go by intuition. It's really interesting. You can do it either way and survive or finish.
Yeah.
But everybody's different about it. I should mention too that it's completely unsupported other than getting from one trail to the next. So you can have your crew between the trails, but there are no aid stations. There's no way stations. You're not allowed to have somebody pacing you. And that's part of what appeals to me about the challenge, is that whole, just the way that Andre's got it structured. And also, previously people used poles. You're no longer allowed to use poles, and you can't use music now.
Yeah.
And we're all worried about what Andre is going to come up with next to make it harder.
Well, don't forget, you have to run them backwards, like not running backwards, but you run the opposite direction that the guidance is giving you. So.
Yes, that's a good point. You run all 4 major trails in the reverse direction, which makes it harder because the signage is the other way. And even when you're running the normal direction, it can be difficult. Some of the trails are marked better.
Yeah.
And this is the stuff I've been learning since I got out of my quarantine prison. So go back to Canada. So I was in Canada. It was awful. I couldn't have anticipated what that would do to me physically and psychologically. It had a big impact on both. So actually just being isolated in Canada for 3 weeks was daunting for me. I'm a social animal and I was alone pretty much. So it was cold and wet and there were bears, and I wanted to do a 100-mile run in 24 hours, but there was no safe place to do it. Instead, I just did stairs and hills as much as I could. I'm glad I did that because I had been worried about what the 14 days in quarantine would do, even with the treadmill that I got from my room. I got this thing called a walking pad. You can run on it, but you can't run that fast on it. Not fast enough to get your heart rate up. At least I couldn't. So I had been concerned about how much fitness I would lose. And it was worse than I thought, even with the treadmill. So I lost weight, I lost muscle, and I lost a certain level of fitness. But fortunately, my baseline level of fitness was high enough because of all the work that I'd done before going to Canada and while I was in Canada. So I had room to lose something.
That's awesome.
But yeah, not having impact, having that cushion on the treadmill really softened me up over those 2 weeks. So the first thing I did when I got here was get outside and walk around and start doing some hiking. And I've been gradually increasing the steps from about 9,000 to 18,000 to 30,000 to 50,000. Over several trips up on the mountain, trying to get to know the trails. And what I'm trying to do right now, my strategy is to scout all the portions of the Maclehose Trail I hadn't been on previously. I previously had been on the first half roughly back in 2019. So I've been doing the second half, the first section, since you do it in reverse. And I learned something really interesting the other day. I was doing this one particular section, I think it's section 3, and it's very technical. And I had forgotten what it was like 2 years ago when you and I did the first parts of the Mac.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm up there. I started off at Chatin Pass. Kind of a funny story. In the documentary, there's a famous scene at this noodle shop where the runners stop to have noodles. I've been to that noodle shop 3 times and didn't know that was the noodle shop.
It was
the noodle shop, the famous noodle shop. Somehow I managed to run past it thinking it was just part of a village. Didn't realize. I didn't even know it was at Chatin Pass. I thought I'd never been to Chatin Pass. I'd been to Chatin Pass twice previously. I just didn't know that's where it was. So anyway, I started in Chatin Pass. The first trip up there, I went the wrong way. I went up these stairs to the top of the mountain, but it didn't matter. I just wanted to be up on the trails. Got some beautiful video. Showed it to Nikki Hunt, who's one of the finishers. She's done it twice. And she said, "Oh, that's beautiful, but that's not the Mac." I said, "No, it's not. And she basically told me that that was the noodle shop. She said, I don't know how you could have missed it. I said, I don't know how I could have missed it either.
It's funny. I think it occurs to me as we're talking about it, you should write about your scouting. I mean, usually I do all of that. I love doing that. That's like part of my thing is I go out and scout all the things and then we run a route. And
yeah,
so
no,
now
you're
it's
right.
reversed. So you should write about that. It's interesting. It's fun, right?
Yeah, so I should say our website is Breaking Impossible, and we both blog about our efforts. And I do more of the human interest stuff, talk about my tailor and the Kung Fu and my personal challenges for training. You've done, like you said, more of the mapping and the planning and the scouting, and that's something I'm trying to learn how to do right now. So the next time I got up to Shatin Pass, I knew where I was. It was my 4th time there. I knew that was the noodle shop. I knew where the Wilson Trail goes and the Maclehose goes and how they follow along with one another for that brief portion. So I went from there roughly to Sai Kung. I should say that Sai Kung is where section 1 begins, so the end of it when you're doing it in the reverse order. I didn't go all the way on the Mac. It got too late in the afternoon. One of the things I'm going to be talking about in these on this channel is sleep and its importance. And you know how obsessed I am with it, but everybody else out there who's watching these videos is going to learn just how obsessed I am with it.
You'll all learn.
One of the reasons I came to Hong Kong as early as I did was so I could get a room close to the beginning of the trail, get used to sleeping in this room, and have lots of good quality sleep prior to starting the challenge, even to do the qualifying run. So anyway, I was out there on section 3, and I was near Sai Kung, and I could have finished the entire thing, but it was getting dark, and I wanted to get back to my hotel so I could get back to my scheduled sleep time, because I understand now how important sleeping at the same time and getting up at the same time, keeping this constant schedule, how that affects you. So anyway, I got to this place where I knew I could get down to Sai Kung, so I just went ahead and went down to Sai Kung, which, by the way, is a very beautiful place. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but it's very nice.
Oh, it's lovely. It's very popular with the expat community. It's second to like.
Yeah, I saw that. There were a lot of Europeans there. Yeah. Interesting thing too, everybody I run into here thinks I'm British, including the guy from New York that I ran into the other day. So anyway, I'm doing section 3, and it's incredibly technical. There's rocks and gravel and branches and roots and steep stairs, but they're not even smooth stairs. They're stairs that are made out of rocks that are jagged and facing the wrong. You cannot ever find a place to find your footing. So Andre was asking me, how did you find section 3? And I said, well, I'm very fit. I can go up and I don't get tired and I don't have to stop, but I go down really slow. And previously I thought I would power hike the up, and then I would run the flats and the downhills and try to make up the time. But these last couple of scouting sessions have me thinking about pacing and doing it in a different way, which is something we should talk about when we've done our previous overnights, trying to figure out how to do the pacing. So anyway, the next time I went out, I was happy to get to, I think it's called Pak Tam Ao. And from there, it's nice and smooth and you can run, and it's mostly downhill. So I did. And I was terrified because I thought I would never make up the time, because the time was slowing way down. It was like 30 minutes per mile, 50 minutes per mile. I was like, how am I ever going to get back up and do this in under 20 hours, right? So surprisingly, running down to closer to the end of the MAC at that point, I made up my time, and I was about 22 minutes per mile, which, considering how slow I was going at the beginning of it, was a big difference. But here's the thing, I don't know if that would have been sustainable if I'd been out all day starting in June Moon, right?
Yeah.
So one of the local runners here that knows all the trails, who's done the MAC more than once, told me that she's learned that you should not to run fast on the downhills or the flats, but to run at a slow, steady pace to save yourself, so you can try to go fast on the steep up parts and fast as you can going down. Now, I'm really worried about going up and going down those steep things fast enough to maintain the overall pace, because the downhill is treacherous in the daytime. And that section of the MAC I'm going to be doing at night. And I don't know how you can go fast enough to do the whole thing in under 20 hours with as steep and as technical as that part of it is. Yeah. But anyway, then I remembered from 2 years ago, that first part of the MAC we did, there were a lot of stairs, but they were nice, structured, even stairs, right? A lot of it was road, and there was quite a bit of it flat and smooth. And so I think maybe if you do the first half fast enough, you can afford to do the middle part slower, but you also don't want to burn yourself out, right? Yeah. So sorting that out is going to be a big deal. And that's
the first running section, which is actually the last parts of the trail, are more popular and more developed, right? And so they have all those things you're talking about. And right. But you will recall as well, the after Mount Taimo, it starts getting technical there too, right? When you're going the direction of the challenge. And
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to read.
Yeah, we have a little bit of
that last part broke up.
Yep. So I was just saying the first sections of the trail, which are of course the last sections, the first ones you're running for the challenge, are developed. But after Mount Taimo, you might also remember, like after Lead Mine Pass, it starts getting real rough and rocky. And yeah, I feel compelled because you said earlier that we ran out of water, like we hadn't planned it, but we actually got tripped up because the expected supply was actually shut. Like I've been up on Lead Mine Pass, like I can't tell you how many times coming over from Taipo. Who knew that week they were changing the supply? But anyway.
Yeah, if you go to our website, I blogged about it, that part, and I think it's MacLehose Part 1. What happened was that there's this place where there are these vending machines. We had anticipated being able to refill our water, but those vending machines, even though they were there, they were shut down. And there were new vending machines that were covered in plastic that said waiting for certification or something. So we couldn't get water unexpectedly. But when I went back the next time, I went down a little further and found out there was a place we could have gotten water if we had known, although that takes you slightly off trail and it's straight down. So you have to go straight up to get back. Yeah. And there's a limit to how far off trail you're allowed to get before you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
For doing things the right way.
But yeah, that's what's funny. Like my memories, of course, of going over Lead Mine Pass is the other way. So basically, I've always come up from Taipo to that position and then went over to Taimo, where we were coming down Taimo to Lead Mine Pass.
And you see things differently, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so I had never been down the other ways as that you're describing. When you go over the other side of the pass, there, I'm sure there is a village there too, but I've never been there. So
you don't want to do too much. And I was all anxious to try to do the full MAC as soon as I got out of quarantine, which would have been a bad plan. For one thing, I get lost easily, and that's going to be a big challenge for me. Actually, I don't like heights either. So I have two things that are going to make the challenge especially difficult for me. I don't like heights, and I have no sense of direction. So Andre pointed out to me, he said, you're going to get lost. You just have to be ready to get lost. You have to expect that's going to happen. And he's right. As long as you're paying attention, you can find out, because you don't see the marker, you can go back to where you were. But sometimes you go pretty far past that. And if it's dark, you don't know where that was that you missed the turn, it can still be difficult. So each time I've been out there, I've gotten lost. Most of the time I found my way back. And I'm going to run the second half, starting with section 4 to section 1, starting at night on Saturday, because I haven't finished the entire thing yet, and because I want to do the parts that I'm going to be doing at night. That's a good idea. I'm going to do this with somebody who knows the Mac.
Oh, good.
So I won't be alone.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'll do the second half, basically the night portion.
I can't now remember if that was Coop's book or Getting Used to Running at Night. His advice was something along the lines of just do it enough that it becomes not special anymore.
Yeah, so I should say I've done night runs. We've done night training several times. We did overnight that we started after a full day's work, so we were maximizing our sleep deprivation and running at night.
Yeah.
And when I was here in 2019, I did go up to Sunset Peak and then run down in the dark. So I've been down Sunset Peak, which is where you finish the entire challenge in the dark. And it's mostly downhill and it's manageable. You can actually go fairly fast. It's not as technical as section 3 on the Mac in mind, from what I remember.
In fact, one of those outings was like the morality tale of this lesson, because we left downtown Seattle right after you finished work at, like 9 or something. And we were going around Lake Sammamish, and we got to a certain point as dawn was breaking, or like just like maybe 30 minutes before first light or something. And we were just like feeling dispirited, and things were difficult. And so we did like wind up calling it. And then I came to find later, it was only like half a mile or a mile, and we would have been on totally familiar territory and easily would have like been rekindled. And I think ever since then, that just sticks in my head. It's like, nope, I'm just going to keep going, because it doesn't seem familiar now. It seems really far, but it's going to look familiar again real soon.
Yeah, we still did 24 hours.
Oh yeah,
we just didn't quite make the loop.
Yeah,
and we did that. Right. The same thing happened when we did the first time, the first 24 hours. We didn't quite close the circle, but we still went for 24 hours.
Yeah, I mean, but
we were pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Military road to where we began is like no distance at all.
We should have just gone the rest of the way, really. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. That's one of the things you find out, is you can always do more than you think you can.
And that the mental game is harder than the physical game. Like you get befuddled, and you got to just keep that focus going. Yeah.
Yes. And we started at night so that we could basically test our tolerance for sleep deprivation, give us an extra 12 hours. But also, I had the idea that if we finished the second half in the daylight, that would make it easier. And I think that does help, finishing the second half in the daylight. I think when you're finishing at night, that can make it harder.
Yeah, well, and that's I'm gonna give a shout out to training in Stockholm, because talking about technical, like I cannot tell you how icy it is. I mean, it snowed 3 days ago, and not any of it has gone away. It's just that cold.
Yeah, that was already happening in Canada.
But I will shout out that like I am using the habits thing that we've talked about so many times, and Delac, and at least doing short runs to the office and back every day now, or pretty much every day, every other day, and doing 10 to 15K on the weekends. And I hope to just start expanding that. And but now I have to rescout everything. So I had a faint glimmer of hope that I would be able to find a 100-mile track to try my qualification here. But both the weather and the newness are just, that glimmer is a distant star that may be a mirage. So so I'm just trying to keep it together.
I hadn't figured out a finish for these videos before, but it makes me think of one. You keep moving forward, right?
Oh yeah.
You're getting out there. Yeah, I mean that's our mantra, right? Do the hard things, get out there, keep moving forward.
Yep, that's exactly it. Step by step. The next step, next mile, next challenge.
Right. One trail at a time, 1 mile at a time, whatever your interval is, whatever your increment, your measure of incrementation is.
That's it, exactly.
All right, my friend, well, stay warm.
Will do. We'll talk soon.
I'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
See ya.